Does evil require malice? Can something without a mind be considered amoral? Bacteria in the form of disease are responsible for some of life's most horrendous fates. But can you really call a single-cell organism cruel? In contrast, the doctor treating this illness does have sentience. If they are willing to do anything to find a cure, at what point do their decisions become immoral? Inflicting pain on fatally ill patients to collect strain samples, defying the deceased's religious wishes and performing an autopsy regardless, inoculating unconsenting people so the disease can be further studied. If you have a problem with any of these actions, does the doctor's genuine desire to save the masses make their actions more condonable? What if this whole time the doctor was a robot? A machine merely following its programming to maximize the number of expected survivors. Is that machine evil, or only unsympathetic towards individual human suffering? In many ways, Maiden Abyss's Bondrewd is this Machiavellian mechanical medic. While the analogy is not entirely applicable, it still provides a reasonable headspace to evaluate him and his actions. Bondrewd has done and continues to do horrific things in the name of progress. He gathers orphans and downtrodden children to experiment on, seeing them as nothing more than a means for his research. Even still, it's hard to condemn him as evil, for the same reason as the robotic doctor. He's not human, at least not anymore. Before we get too into things, I'll give a quick Spark Notes primer on the manga for people who haven't read it, or have but don't remember much. On an isolated island in the middle of the sea, there's a giant chasm over 15,000 meters deep. The abyss, as it's referred to, isn't simply a large hole. It might as well be a different world entirely. Dangerous creatures and exotic plants inhabit its depths. Despite all its perils, a few brave souls are willing to risk their lives for a chance at the almost magical relics and lost knowledge buried within. The city of Orth is built on the outer rim of the Great Pit, to give explorers and their families a place to live that's mostly free from the horrors waiting below. Because the abyss is so unfathomably dangerous, Orth issues delvers a rank and corresponding depth limits depending on their ability. Such precautions are necessary since the most dangerous aspect of the abyss is not its monsters, it's the inescapable curse that sickens anybody who climbs upwards while inside. The effects of this curse start out tame, but quickly grow stronger as one travels lower until ascending spells certain death if you are lucky, or fates even worse for those who are not. Delvers are given a whistle that indicates their rank with its color, red being the lowest and white being the highest. Bondrewd is a white whistle. I don't mean that in the Delver hierarchy way. Bondrewd is a white whistle. Unlike the lower classes of whistles, white whistles are powerful second-grade relics that can awaken the true capabilities of other relics. This is necessary for journeying to the 6th layer and beyond, since it's the only way to activate the altar of the absolute boundary and be lowered through the sea of corpses. Aspiring delvers are in luck, however, as white whistles are one of a select few relics that modern people still know how to create. All you need to do is carve the whistle out of the life-reverberating stone called Your Worth. We also know how to make Your Worth. Come here, I have something to tell you.
Listen to me, Hatcher. You gotta tell him Soylent Green is people!
Your Worth is people! Sadly, unlike Soylent Green, Your Worth cannot be made out of unwilling participants. Each life-reverberating stone emanates the wishes and desires of the person who gave their life to create it. It is this so-called life insignia that gives white whistles their power. When someone wants to be turned into Your Worth, they willingly sacrifice their lives with the intent to aid another. This life insignia is only compatible with the person the stone was created for. Since the white whistles are created from these stones, they can only be used by that person. Bondrewd didn't have anybody who would give their life for his ambitions. He was alone. So he used himself. Now dying for your beliefs is all well and good, but when you're sacrificing your life to enable yourself to continue your ambitions, you end up with a teensy tiny problem. The whole being dead thing. The solution to this predicament is to have more Bondrewds. At an unknown point in time, Bondrewd managed to duplicate himself using Zoaholic, a special grade relic. Zoaholic, the soul slave machine, is a giant flower-shaped relic that allows sentient beings to divide their consciousness and implant it into other living creatures. It's not clear how someone who wishes to duplicate themselves gets their soul into Zoaholic, but we are explicitly told all it takes to plant that soul into a host is physical contact with the relic. Touching the soul slave machine instantly puts the person or creature under a nearly unbreakable enchantment that connects them to the user's soul. Having another person's soul implanted into your body doesn't overwrite you and strip you of your own mind. It acts more like getting plugged into a consciousness network. Thoughts and sensory information can be shared freely with anyone who has the same soul. Bondrewd's essence, however, can take over a specific body and transform it into himself, or remotely control any number of bodies on the network. Using Zoaholic does come with one minuscule drawback: the gradual destruction of your mind and humanity. Apparently duplicating and dispersing your soul into an intangible hive mind is a bad thing for your sense of self and moral judgment. Who would have thought? Humans who use the soul slave machine end up as shadows of their former selves. The finer parts of their humanity, such as ethics and empathy, fade away. However, some aspects of an individual's personhood are stronger than others. Inhibitions seem to be lost first, while aspirations and goals endure the longest, explaining Bondrewd's apathy towards those harmed by his insatiable pursuit of knowledge, and why his scientific inclinations are so potent. In a way, they're all he has left of himself. As such, it's difficult to condemn Bondrewd's actions post-Zoaholic in the same way we would judge a human's. To accurately understand Bondrewd's morality, we need to know what he did as a human and what happened after he used Zoaholic. The clearest way to do this is to construct a timeline and determine when Bondrewd first duplicated his soul. Our first and most important date is 15 years ago, when Zoaholic disappeared, presumably from the city of Orth's storage. Special grade relics like the Soul Slave Machine are the highest official artifact classification and are seen as too powerful for an individual to own. Instead, they are owned by cities or nations. Where Zoaholic was kept is not clear, but we know that it was lost, at least officially speaking. For the other dates, we can turn to Uncle Havelg for help. Around 10 years ago, a series of things previously unheard of was accomplished. A route into the inviolable was pioneered, and a base that works even deep within the abyss was secured. Those two things push beyond the stagnated delving techniques of the time. Right. There was also the incident where the flying insects filled up the hole, wasn't there? Bondrewd was the one who took care of it. He sounds like a good person. Which part of him is bad? His methods are also previously unheard of. He put relics and information of the abyss through illegal channels. It seems like he received huge foreign funding with the medicine he produced through human experimentation. He performs his developments based on that. He poisoned every water source that he knew the insects were coming from. He burned all the wildlife that disrupted the securing of the route, regardless of what might have still been around. They would just get eradicated along with the surrounding environment. He brought dawn to the entirety of accepted traditions and the pride of the Delvers, trampling over them. Truly the Lord of Dawn. Why does he look like he's having fun? He's a white whistle enthusiast after all. Come to think of it, he seems to be wanted overseas for some unclear criminal offense. There were some who aimed for his bounty, but every single one ended up disappearing. Now, nobody would approach him out of fear. I've seen some truly astonishing native wildlife. I have also met delvers who have touched insanity, but when I met him, Bondrewd gave a different impression than all of them. There was something strange about his character. He feels like he's something that's merely masquerading, imitating humans. If monsters truly do exist within the abyss, things like him would qualify as one. Squinting past the roughness of this fan translation, there's a lot of important information in Havelg's story. Let's start by listing each event and then place the significant ones on our timeline as best we can afterwards. When Halbolg talks about a route into the inviolable, it almost sounds like he's talking about a place or region in the abyss. But the lack of a capital I and my research into the subject suggests that this is just an artifact of poor grammar and word choice. What's likely being said here is that Bondrewd created safer trails for delvers to descend into the abyss with by burning the obstacles in the way, alive or otherwise, so it's not very relevant for moralizing Bondrewd. Next, we have the establishment of an unnamed base deep within the abyss. There is only one known delver base that matches this description, as Ozen's outpost is too shallow to warrant being referred to as deep within the abyss. It is extremely likely that Halbolg is referring to the ancient ritual ground known as the Iddo Front that was recently renovated into a forward operating base. Not only is the Iddo Front Bondrewd's current research station, but it has mysteriously become home to Zooaholic at some point in the last 15 years, making this date extremely relevant. Bondrewd exterminating the flying insects isn't important, but it demonstrates his frequent use of extreme measures during this period. We also learn how Bondrewd covers his expenses. He peddles relics and information on the black market and receives external funding from discovering some kind of medicine through human experimentation. Bondrewd's use of humans in his studies is possibly the most damning thing he has done, so placing this in relation to him losing his humanity is critical. Lastly, he was charged with an unknown crime, which caused bounty hunters to track him down, some even venturing all the way to the Iddo Front itself. While not exactly a date, Halbolg's account of their first meeting confirms that by the time they encountered each other, Bondrewd already seemed inhuman. Now for the timeline section. Halbolg claims these events happened around 10 years before the start of Rico's dive, so we can confidently put them after Zooaholic vanished. Your first inclination might be to slap everything we just covered on the 10 years ago mark and call it a day. To my great dismay, it's sadly not that easy. As for why, let's go over the scene again and look closely at what is said and when. It's pretty clear that the first 5 text bubbles are one connected statement, but after that, Halbolg shifts to answering Kiyui's question, which means that the 10 years ago time frame is not applicable anymore. Afterward, he loops back to use the insect incident and root clearing as examples of Bondrewd's callous practices. What this means for us is that the timeline looks like this so far. This timeline makes the assumption that Bondrewd wasn't active in the Abyss before 10 years ago. The reason I feel this assumption can be made stems from Bondrewd's oversea crime, novel methods, and Halbolg not meeting Bondrewd until he became a white whistle. Most people who are born in Orth feel a strong attraction to the Abyss and are hesitant to move away for any reason, short of, say, a looming apocalypse caused by the 2,000-year cycle. As a result, Bondrewd's presence overseas, plus his new delving practices, make me believe that he is a foreigner who moved to Orth around 10 years ago and quickly made a name for himself. Although, even if you disagree with me and think that he is from Orth, the fact that Halbolg, a seasoned delver that has participated in or led several high-profile expeditions, didn't encounter Bond until after he used Zooaholic is strange, unless Bondrewd wasn't a delver until shortly before he sacrificed himself to become a white whistle. If we use that assumption, then Bond wouldn't have any relics or information to sell until he arrived in Orth. With similar reasoning, the bounty hunters wouldn't be in Orth or the Abyss if Bond wasn't there. Constructing a concrete timeline is unfortunately impossible, because information on Bondrewd's past is scarce and often ambiguous since most of it is revealed through passing dialogue. While this may be true for basically everything else, we do get a glimpse of Bondrewd's human experimentations through Nanachi's flashback. Whenever we see Bondrewd's white whistle or Umbra hands, we know we are dealing with a post-Zooaholic Bond. The logic is simple. If Bondrewd turned himself into your worth before using Zooaholic, he wouldn't have other bodies to use it with, and the Umbra hands are said bodies. Secondly, he brings the children to the Iddo Front, which is located 13,000 meters deep. This sets the time frame for Nanachi's experimentation group at a maximum of approximately 10 years ago due to the Iddo Front base construction happening then. However, the question of whether Nanachi's group was the only or even first group Bondrewd studied still remains. This scene provides context as well as a stone-cold line.
Sovereign of Dawn, what are you thinking? Bringing that many people to the 5th layer, even children from overseas as well.
What is it now? It is for that very reason that I advocated bringing black whistles to the fifth layer.
Never mind if they were delvers, but taking children that can never return when considering the curse, it's just from a humane perspective.
Ah, so there's no need for concern. Those aren't being used as humans. Would you like to observe? The unknown Black Whistle's protestations indicate that what Bondrewd is doing is highly unusual and unexpected. Their shock at Bond bringing the kids down to the fifth layer suggests that dangerous and inhumane actions are not considered typical behavior for Bondrewd yet. If Bond already had a record of human experiments, the unknown Black Whistle would likely react in a more jaded and contemptful way instead of being surprised. One could argue that this is only the first time Bondrewd got caught bringing children to the Idofront. But that's likely not the case. Whether it is a result of Zoaholic's influence or not, Bondrewd is not known for his subtlety, so I don't think it would be very likely for him to A. care enough to hide his experimentations, and B. actually be able to pull it off. As a white whistle and a collective consciousness, Bondrewd is effectively above the law. Those who disagree disappear. And what can the city of Orth do to stop him? Kill him? Like that matters. He dies all the time. If you subscribe to this thinking, that means that all of Bondrewd's human trials in the Abyss had to happen post-Zoaholic. He could have done more before relocating to Orth, but there's no information for or against that notion. Going only off of what we actually have some evidence for allows us to place Bond's first human experiments after the construction of the Idofront base. At this point, we have exhausted all the data that can be gained using the manga alone. Now we turn our sights to more dubious but still reputable sources such as interviews and side content. During the staff commentary of Wandering Twilight, the second movie, Sakushi, Made in Abyss's mangaka, and Kojima, the movie's director, discussed the first film's intro scene, which is a movie-exclusive primer for those who haven't read the manga. In the new content in the first movie, Sakushi-sensei told me to make the foreign delver helmet like a praying hand. That's what it is. I didn't even know. That new content is great. It even contains the discovery of the Zoaholic, in a way. Okay, so the new content shows how Zoaholic was found. Let's take a look at it.
それ、昨日の人たちの。
ああ、海外の探掘隊だな。笛を持たないならず者までいた。ワクワクするな。ほどほどにね。
What? Alright, I have my work cut out for me here. The presence of a praying hand helmet 12 years ago means that Bondrewd used Zoaholic by then, since praying hand is an alternate name for the Umbra hands. We also get a bit of support for the idea that Bond is a foreigner, since some of the Umbra hands are foreigners. If there's a precedent for people moving to Orth and becoming delvers, then Bondrewd doing the same isn't too out of the ordinary. That was the easy part. It's the final line that gets me. We know for a fact that Orth declared Zoaholic lost 15 years before Rico's adventure, yet Sakushi is saying that it was discovered in this scene 3 years after it went missing. What do you mean by discovered? This is a situation where word choice really matters, so let's look at the original Japanese transcript. The word hoken is used to describe this event. It means to discover or find and comes with the soft implication that the thing in question hasn't been found before. If we take the statement as literally as possible, we have a major continuity problem. The simplest solution is to interpret it more as a rediscovery, Saihaken, than a new discovery, Shinhaken. And that would make sense, but only if it was the first time anybody from Orth encountered an Umbra hand. As we said earlier, if there is an Umbra hand, someone who has had Bondrewd's soul implanted into them with a soul slave machine, then Bondrewd must have located Zoaholic and used it. So Liza finding the Umbra hand's helmet is in a roundabout way discovering that somebody has found the missing relic. The question is, when and where did Bond find it? Like most of the Sovereign of Dawn's past, we can't know for sure, although we can make educated guesses. Let me ask you a question. Do you think Bondrewd would steal Zoaholic just to keep it for 3 years without using it? If we assume that Bond was the reason Zoaholic disappeared, and the helmet from 12 years ago really is the discovery of the Umber Hands, then there's a 3-year period where he either didn't use it or kept the Umber Hands hidden. To me, that doesn't feel like something he would do. My guess is that he found it 12 years ago when constructing the Idofront base, or while he was clearing new paths. Habog tells the kids that this happened around 10 years ago, and 12 years ago fits that description. We know that Zoaholic is currently stored in a sealed room deep within the Idofront. Whether he found it there, or somewhere else and brought it to the Idofront, isn't too important. Either way, Bondrewd finding Zoaholic 12 years ago, and then using it soon after, explains the 3-year gap. We have about all the information we can get, so let's answer the question we've been waiting for to the best of our ability. Who is Bondrewd? Bondrewd was born somewhere overseas where he worked as a researcher. Although he had never been to the Abyss, it fascinated him. That would all change when Bond gets caught for some unknown major crime, one with a bounty large enough that hunters begin to track him down. Needing a place to flee, he escapes to the Abyss, the object of his curiosity and the least enticing place for enterprising hunters to follow him into. Once in Orth, Bondrewd makes fast progress due to his foreign sensibilities, scientific nature, and need to distance himself from the people chasing him. Deep within the Abyss, perhaps in one of the Idofront's hidden chambers or along the way, Bond discovers Zoaholic. Either swayed by the Soul Slave machine's tempting aura or by a calculated decision to enable him to create his white whistle, Bondrewd touches the insidious relic. Now liberated from his humanity, Bondrewd's thirst for knowledge is freed from the shackles of morality and the limits of a single life. Some of the bounty hunters or delvers who confront him are persuaded to become Umber Hands, while others simply disappear. The first Bondrewd sacrifices his body to bring dawn for those who come after. Then the Sovereign of Dawn, a product of a fractured soul, more monster than man, gathers test subjects in hopes of finding a cure for the strains of ascension. He not only succeeds in finding a cure, but also learns how to harness the Abyss's blessing. Bondrewd raises his adoptive daughter, Perushka, with this new knowledge. She is raised lovingly, away from the experiments done on the other children. When the time comes for Bondrewd to receive his blessing, Perushka is processed and turned into both a cartridge and your worth. After Team Rico defeats the Blessed Body, Rico takes her new white whistle and uses it to continue on their adventure, leaving Bondrewd to his research. One of the reasons I think Bondrewd is so compelling is the ambiguity that surrounds him. He's a fairly complex character with an unclear past, who does questionable things, but in a situation that's not immediately condemnable. This leaves a lot of room for reader interpretation. The summary of Bondrewd that I gave earlier is just one of many reasonable conclusions. The timeline section makes that quite clear. Bondrewd is interesting because he doesn't follow the standard evil scientist or torturer formula. He asks real questions that we as viewers have just enough information to form answers with, but not so much that the conclusions are spelled out. Is Bondrewd an evil person? No. I wouldn't say so. For all the pain he's caused, he's never acted with ill intent. He genuinely loved his daughter Perushka and cares for Nanachi. Bondrewd even remembers the names and dreams of every single child he sacrificed in his pursuit, and it makes sense why the kid's hopes and ambitions would resonate with him. Because ambition is all he is. Bondrewd is like a statue left out in the elements. Over time, the finer details erode away, leaving only vague shapes and a silhouette behind. Zoaholic is the rain, and scientific progress is his simplified form. Despite being a tender, caring man, he doesn't let his feelings impede his research. If his own daughter has more value in a cartridge than alive, so be it. Although, perhaps, just maybe, part of him wanted to set Perushka off on the adventure she always wanted, even if she had to become a whistle to do so. To me, Bondrewd is more of an antagonist than a villain. He acts as an opposing force to Rico and the gang, but doesn't seek destruction or suffering. He wants to solve problems and protect the people of Orth from the end of the 2,000-year cycle looming just over the horizon. Admittedly, I have a rather sympathetic view of the original Bondrewd. I interpret his unspecified crime as something more like embezzling or smuggling, rather than the crimes against humanity he would later commit. I also think that he used Zoaholic out of a sense for the greater good, or ignorance, instead of a want of power. But you could think differently, construct the timeline in another order, or anything in between, and Bondrewd would suddenly be much less defensible. That's what makes him a great character. There's so much to mentally chew on, and it all has a significant effect on the ethics of his decisions and his characterization. I'd really like to hear your interpretation. Who is Bondrewd to you? What I like most about Bondrewd is that he highlights the complexities of morality. Every little detail matters. Is he an evil person? No, he's not. Because he's not even a person. Did he lose his humanity willingly? Yes. But he could have acted out of a sense of necessity or been manipulated by Zoaholic's attracting power. What did he do overseas? Who knows? Morality isn't black or white, nor is it a spectrum of gray. It is a multi-dimensional color wheel with shades that we don't even understand yet. Thinking in absolutes will make you a broken clock. When you are right, you will only have the correct answer because it just happened to align with your pre-established view.